Adobe Firefly is the all-in-one creative studio with AI-powered image and video editing for today's creative process. Built for creators of every kind, Firefly helps you generate, edit, and experiment fast. Because the asks aren't getting smaller, the budgets aren't getting bigger, and the timelines, oh yeah, still tight. With all the best creative AI models in one place, Firefly brings your ideas to life. Unlock a better way to make with Adobe Firefly.
Now, at McDonald's, get a $5 McChicken meal deal or a $6 McDouble meal deal. They come with small fries, a soft drink, and 4-piece McNuggets. We're gonna need a bigger tray. Get more value with your meal deal.
Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher for delivery.
Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganone and Matthew Betz.
Welcome in to the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. It is not Kyle Borganone today. Kyle is out, not charting, taking a break from charting yards per out run against, zone coverage. He's taking a break from bashing Caleb Williams on Twitter. He is out actually having fun away from his computer for once this summer. Kyle is not here today, so I'm going to run the show, which, in and of itself, what could possibly go wrong? I do have with me today, however, Chris Cash. The Cash Man is joining me because Kyle is at the Backstreet Boys concert in Las Vegas. So, Cash, welcome to the show. People have heard us talk about you on the show a bunch. They're probably like, who the heck is this Chris Cash guy? If you're in Discord, you know Chris. If you're on Twitter, you know Chris. But Chris, introduce the people. This is your DFS and Betting Pod debut, so welcome to the show, my man.
Yes, thank you for having me, Betz. I am very excited that they've put the two most degenerate, smartest two gambling minds together for an hour on the Fantasy Footballers podcast. So we're going to have a great time. But thank you so much for being here. It's been awesome. I've listened to you since the first episode. That was the day before your wedding. I listened to that episode, and I've been here ever since. So, but yeah, I am Chris Cash, and I've been a Foot Clan member for a long time. And a couple years ago, I came in third place of the DK Millie Maker for Best Ball. And so I've been writing for the Footballers over the last year and a half and doing the DFS stuff and the best ball content for the Ballers.
Dude, that is a amazing pool that you're able to recall that the first episode was actually the day before my wedding, which I remember at the time having that conversation, with the guys through work and with Kyle, and we're like, all right, when do we want the show to start? Because it was completely rebranded. Like, the old hosts were out. They were like, hey, Kyle and Betz, can you do this? We were like, sure, I guess. They're like, when is a good time for you? I was like, well, this week is not ideal. I am getting married this weekend. But Kyle and I were able to kind of sneak it in early. My wife knew what she was getting into like that week, and she's been a trooper ever since. But what a pull. Yes, Chris has been a listener for so long. It kind of feels like he's been one of us for a very long time, but you mentioned the success you've had on DraftKings, and that is the show today. We are talking exclusively DraftKings Best Ball, which does have differences, which we'll talk about. I know a lot of people play on Underdog, some people play on Drafters, different styles, but today is a DraftKings specific show, and I wanted to have Chris on to discuss this because he has had a ton of success on DraftKings specifically. So, Chris, you mentioned it a couple years ago, had that insane sweat in the DK Millie final. Talk some people through kind of maybe your background as a DFS player, maybe your background as a best ball player, how you got into it, all that sort of stuff, and then we'll get into the meat of the show today.
Perfect. Yeah. So I kind of dabbled. I saw on FanDuel, they're like, thanks for being a member with us for 12 years. So I was like, oh my goodness, I've been doing this for way too long. And so I kind of did the DFS stuff for a while. I was doing the Sunday slates. And then I really liked best ball just because I got into it because I thought it was better than mock drafting. And the guys will mention on the main show about how we like using the best ball ADP because people are actually putting money on it. And so did that, started making best ball a bigger part of my portfolio. And then all of a sudden, 2 years ago, I'm sitting there in first place after Sunday Night Football. And here's what I want to tell you people that are listening. I was in your shoes for so many years, playing smart, making sure the bankroll I was being responsible, and then finally it hit. And so just remember, this game takes a long time, but I promise you, one of you is going to be in that position at some point in the future. And so that's kind of how I got into it. And then after I had that hit, it changed my life. And here I am talking with you and writing for the Ballers.
Dude, that was such a fun evening for everybody that was involved in Discord. And I know you and I were DMing a bunch. Like, we didn't really know each other much because you were part of the Loyal Foot Clan, but like you kind of emerged like as you had some success. You're like, hey man, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, dropping some ideas in Discord. I was like, man, this Chris guy's pretty smart. All of a sudden you're sharing your lineups with me. You're like, hey, I'm in the final tonight. I was like, whoa, this is sweet. So being able to like track all of that vicariously through you, like I felt nervous for you. Like I had nothing on the line. I had no teams in the final that year. So I'm just watching, I had a DFS lineup going, of course, but I'm just watching and kind of living vicariously through Chris and sweating every catch. What a what a sweat that was. That was the Ricky Pearsall year. Is that correct? In week 17?
Yes, him and Kittle. And I had Kittle on my team, but he didn't hit my lineup. So Kittle hit the flex of the guy that finished in second. So I finished by out of $1 million by 0.8. And then I lost just, and then just a $765,000 swing on about 4 fantasy points. No big deal, but it's really awesome, guys. Like we do this for those moments, and I had friends over and we were all celebrating. And at the end of the day, I was just grateful to be there. But seriously, Betz, I mean, it's been a lot of the stuff you and Borg have been teaching for a long time. And it's just, giving yourself a shotgun approach and the opportunity to do that. So I just can't wait this year for one of our Discord people to be in the exact same spot.
Yeah. One of the Foot Clan has to take down the Millie this year for sure. It's so funny hearing you talk about that. Like, we always remember the highs of like our biggest wins and all that sort of stuff. But man, those like small, like, it was 0.4 points. Like, you're not going to ever forget that, right? Even though you're so thankful for the outcome that happened, and that is a 99th, 0.9 percentile outcome to happen, like even still being like 0.4 points, not even a single catch difference in that score. Just wild. But yes, Chris does a lot of work for us. Doing some best ball content. You've had a DraftKings series all summer, which has been awesome. In season, if you've been in the DFS Pass, part of the Ultimate Draft Kit Plus, you've seen Chris's work. He's been doing a bunch of articles for us over the last year, notably adding in Monday Night Showdown, which previously people kept asking Kyle and I, they're like, Betz, Borg, like, can you guys please put out Monday night? And we're like, we need like a day to reset. So we had to bring Chris in. He helped us with that. So it has been awesome. So we have you guys covered every week, Thursday through Monday, for all the slates. But we'll have that again this year. Chris will be back for the 2026 season. Very excited about that. Before we get into the biggest kind of differences on DraftKings versus other sites, Chris, would you describe yourself mostly as a DraftKings player? Do you play like 50-50 on other sites? Like, what's kind of your bankroll allotment these days? I know for me, I started out a lot more on Underdog because it was kind of pushed more, like it was just more publicized. And then DraftKings said, oh, like, there's this market, we should get involved. And it's been really good as a consumer for a best ball player and for all of our listeners to have multiple ways to go about it. I personally have found that I have had more success on DraftKings, and so I have played there more personally in the last year or two. I'm curious your thoughts on that, because I know a lot of people ask us, like, should you divvy it 50-50? Should you play on all three sites if you have drafters? What would you say to those kind of folks?
So I think that UD has done a really good job of helping with their advance rate structure. So I play both, but here's how I divvy it up. Most of my money is in DraftKings, but my exposures is sort of split between both sites, just because UD has some of these new tournaments where the advance rate, instead of 212, 112, 112, it's 312, 15, 15. And so last year was a very humbling experience, because after you do really well, you think that you are so smart at best ball and you're going to win every year. You do not. I can't confirm. And so I like having the advance rate on UD, but I like my fees more at DraftKings just because the demographic of player is so much weaker. The Underdog crowd, yes, there are new people coming in, but with the promo weeks and with the sportsbook carryover that come into DraftKings, it's just a weaker field. And I want to take advantage of that. I mean, how many times do we see 5 quarterbacks go because people didn't set their position limits? And so most of our advantage is on DraftKings, and that's where I do most of my fees. Yes. Yeah,
I'm glad you brought that up. I think it kind of sounds, I don't want to say it sounds bad from like an outside perspective, but like I've said this before multiple times, like I want to play on the softest sites to have a chance to win money. And like, that sounds so like cutthroat. Obviously we have fun with this and we're trying to make it a good time and all those sort of things. But like at the bottom line, it's like, that's what we're all trying to do. It is about the friends you made along the way. It is about the crowns you earn along the way, of course, but we're all here to try to make a profit. And so I think in some of these head-to-head contests, whether it's like DFS, like you'll see some wild, egregious stuff. Kyle and I have talked about that on the show. And in these like promo weeks, which we just had one on DraftKings this past week, there are some wild rooms out there. And, you'll see some stuff that you're just like, this is insane. And yes, like you will see that stuff on other sites every now and then. I will say it is far more often that you'll see it on DraftKings. And so look, like if you want to have some softer action, DraftKings is a good place to do that. Before we jump into more differences, talking DraftKings and really diving in here, let's just take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Now at McDonald's, get a $5 McChicken meal deal or a $6 McDouble meal deal. They come with small fries, a soft drink, and 4-piece McNuggets. We're gonna need a bigger tray. Get more value with your meal deal.
Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher for delivery.
My day kicks off with a refreshing Celsius energy drink, then straight to the gym. Pre-K pickup, back home to meal prep. Time for my fire station shift. One more Celsius, gotta keep the lights on. When the 3-alarm hits, I'm ready. Celsius. Live, fit, go. Grab a cold, refreshing Celsius at your local retailer or locate now at Celsius.com.
All right, Chris, let's dive in here to DraftKings Best Ball. So first, let's start like top down. I know that a lot of people listening play on both sites, play on multiple sites. They kind of probably get it to some degree or to most degree, but talk me through how you approach DK Best Ball versus other sites, scoring differences, looking at the bonuses, that sort of stuff.
Sure. So the first thing that I like to look at is just, you get the 2 extra rounds, so how do I want to use those 2 extra picks? And we're going to get into it more in a minute when we get to rankings about some of this stuff, but I see a lot of people using those 2 extra rounds as insulation instead of using it as nitro boosters. And what I mean by that is, if you look at this year with so many running backs going so early, and, I'll go 5 running backs a lot of times if I start running back. And then I'm looking for, because I know that I'm weak at the wide receiver spot, for example, I'm then going to use that at another wide receiver spot. And so I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that I'm seeing this year is people are saying, well, I have 5 running backs. I mean, I better go take Marshawn Lloyd is my 6th running back or whoever it is when you already have 3 studs at that position. So I'm going to use that 3rd spot for quarterbacks when I have a fragile quarterback room, when I wait till after pick 100, or the same thing at tight end when I'm going for tight ends. I just see people using those 2 extra picks as insulation when it's doing absolutely nothing for your lineup to help separate when the money really matters. What about you?
Makes sense. Yeah, the biggest difference I want to point out for folks is those extra 2 rounds. On Underdog, you're getting 18 rounds for most tournaments. On DraftKings, the standard is 20. And it's pretty daunting when you get into those rounds because, let's be honest, there are no quote-unquote good picks left, right? Like, there's nobody that you click the button and you're like, sweet, I cannot wait to click this guy in as my wide receiver 7 or tight end 4 or whatever it is. Like, that truthfully is not a thing, right? Unless we get information where, like, last year, there were some rumblings like, hey, like, the Commanders might move on from Brian Robinson. Like, Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt is still there in round 19. Like, you can still get this guy. And then, of course, like a week later, that's gone. There might be that this year, but as we were talking, in mid to late July, that currently does not exist. However, when I'm thinking about DraftKings, like, every round matters so much. And so I think what you said there about, like, not just like ignoring those last 2 rounds is like, I'll throw this guy in, whatever. Like, I'll throw Marshawn Lloyd in. Like, think about what your lineup, I think, needs in that specific contest that you're in or that specific draft that you're in. Like, if you went 3 running backs to the first 5 rounds, we always talk about this too, right? You just draft as if you're right. Mm-hmm. If Jonathan Taylor goes down and you also took, Chase Brown in that draft, and like, if one of those 2 guys goes down, your first 2 picks, that team probably isn't doing well anyway, right? So do I need to tack on in round 20, I don't know, Justice Hill or like kind of whoever it is for you that week? Maybe not, but maybe there's an upside rookie where the chances of, I'm just pulling off the top of my head, like Chris Brazell or something like that from Carolina, where it's like, yeah, most weeks he's giving you a 0. But like in the right tail outcomes, which if you're playing large field tournaments, you do need that. Like, could that be a guy that randomly spikes late in the season for, 4 for 80 and a touchdown? Like, those sort of things I think you should think through based off what you did in the earlier rounds. But the biggest thing I'll say is do not just throw away those last 2 rounds. I know a lot of people get to round 17, round 18, they kind of start zoning out, don't care, whatever, and just either auto or, take a 4th quarterback or something silly. Don't waste those spots. It is very, very valuable, I will say. The other thing in regards to the scoring system, there's some bonuses, but the main difference on DraftKings is that full PPR setting. So do you tend to trend more wide receiver heavy on DraftKings, or do you kind of still stick to what's like the current meta, which is, I mean, RB early, for years was not a thing. Now it is the thing after the success of the last 2 years.
I am absolutely going to do the same thing. And quite frankly, last year was not good because I have a tendency to go hero RB and zero RB on DraftKings. But I mean, Kyle said this stat a month ago or so. It's like, what is it? 15 of the top 16 running backs played 15 games or something like that. I mean, the most volatile position in the sport of football all of a sudden is not volatile at the most expensive spot in the entire draft. And so for me, because so many people, which is funny because 3 years ago, it was like, oh, you're not a zero RB, bro. Do you even know best ball? Do you even play best ball? Taking 2 running backs, and now the exact same people are like, oh, you got to take 3. You better get 3 in the first 6 round right now, or you don't know ball. So for me, I am going to zig when the field zags, and I'm going to absolutely smash it. I'm going to have everything in the portfolio. I'm going to have hyper fragiles and hero RBs and stuff. But for me, I absolutely love taking those wide receivers early just because of the separation I can get. I mean, if you start 4 awesome wide receivers, you can get some passing backs, some contingent backs later that can really help you separate.
For sure. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that out. I've thought about that a lot this offseason of just like, it felt like that, I think, 2 years ago, where zero running back teams had done so well for years on both sides, Underdog as well. And so naturally, we just, as drafters, say, okay, this is what worked last year. Let's just keep doing that. And it's really important to understand that the data that we always share, whether it's advance rate or what structures worked, it's always descriptive, not predictive of the upcoming year. And I remember there was a point like 2 summers ago where, you get into like the 4th round and we're drafting like the wide receiver 50. And it's like, I mean, I'm exaggerating, of course, but I'm like, this doesn't feel right. And so if you're able to pivot when people are overconfident in a certain strategy, yeah, if you're wrong, you get buried, but if you're right, the payoff is massive. And so this year, it feels like a really good opportunity to, I don't think avoiding running backs early is what I would describe. Like, I've been kind of more into those hero RB builds because of the fact that we are so confident, in general, of what happened the last 2 years. Like, sure, running backs could be great again, but would it surprise anybody if the pendulum swung back? I don't think so, especially on a full PPR site like DraftKings. Getting, 3 in the first 5 or 6 rounds feels very, very good to me. The quarterback pricing is really interesting, which we'll talk about as well. And so there's kind of ways to zig while the field zags, so to speak. And I'm glad you brought that up. I know you have some data in here about like positional players picked before ADP of 100 in the last 4 years. Do you want to share some of that with people? Because I think this is a good way to kind of highlight this point that we're talking through.
Sure. So we're looking at, draft capital in the first 100 picks. And so what's crazy is looking at the quarterback this year, the pricing of quarterback 12 to 24 is outrageous. If you look at the most elite of elites, like the Lamars are actually cheaper than they were last year. And so the very top end are cheaper, but there's still 14 quarterbacks going off in the first 100 picks. Last year, there was only 11. If you look at running back, we have 37 running backs going off the board in the top 100. Last year was only 34. Now, wide receiver, last year we had 47. Well, this year we have 42. So there's less wide receivers that people have that they have access to that can help me separate in a room. So if I can take, almost 10% of those off in the first 5 rounds, I'm automatically making my wide receiver group stronger than most of the pod. And so I'm trying to play into the fact that the field is overcorrecting, which is always what we do. Recency bias in DFS and best ball is the biggest edge that we have because people overreact. People are emotional. Can you believe that, Betz? About football. Emotional. But when everyone is overreacting, I'm not going to do that. So that's kind of, I want to be ahead of the crowd. And this is one thing I want to tell the Foot Clan too. Send me more 12th place finishes. Like if you do everything from an architecture standpoint, I want to see tail-end outcomes, either your first or your last. I really hope players are okay with understanding that when I'm trying to build out, as long as I follow some sound rules, like not drafting 5 quarterbacks, it's okay to come in last. You want these tail outcomes. So what do you think about some of these quarterback prices and the wide receivers going off at pick 100?
Yeah, the quarterback pricing is something that Kyle and I have talked a little bit about throughout the summer where just something feels off. And I think on DraftKings in particular, if you're playing over there, you'll notice that the discrepancy between tiers 2 and 3 relative to like tiers 5 and 6 is very small. Like it's Josh Allen, generally speaking, if you have a somewhat normal room in like the early third, sometimes he goes in the second. And then you have kind of like the Lamar, Joe Burrow tier. Sometimes you'll see Hurts creep up a little bit, but he's a good value. We talked literally every week about Jaden Daniels. So like those guys all feel like really strong upside picks. And then not that far after, you're getting like kind of traditional pocket passers. You're getting the Brock Purdy's of the world, the Jared Goffs, those types, Jordan Love. Like everybody is like bunched up in this kind of third and fourth tier, right around pick 90 to like 120. That usually, like in previous years, I remember being so excited to get into round 14 and 15 to be like, oh, here's a late round quarterback I can tack on as my quarterback 3. And I know we had a question in Discord from somebody that was asking, like, do you stick to the standard, on DraftKings, like a lot of people buy into like the 3-6-8-3 type of build. I think that's harder to do this year, because of quarterback pricing. Whereas like in past seasons, I remember thinking back to last year, like you could get a couple of mid-round options and say, okay, I know Jackson Dart probably isn't starting week 1, but he has the rushing profile we look at, and you can get him in round 18, 19, 20. Okay, Tyler Shuck, yes, it's going to take some weeks. You can squint and see it. Like there was issues, obviously, with him as a prospect, but we all thought he will get a chance at some point to start. He can run a little bit. Tack him on as a quarterback 3. A couple years ago, when Bo Nix was a rookie, he was available as the starter in the last couple of rounds of drafts. And when you look at the current landscape of quarterback, once you get past like Bryce Young, who is more expensive than he should be, I love Cam Ward. We've talked about that this summer. I'm not behind rankings in Cam Ward because he has moved up so far. You get to a point where it is a cliff. Like after Aaron Rodgers, it is a cliff. And so on DraftKings, where people are so, I think, enticed to like not get boxed out at quarterback, you'll see a lot of double and triple taps kind of in this like pick 90 to like 130 range, generally speaking. And so if you're not one of those people and you kind of get behind the 8 ball, then you're staring down, okay, I guess I'm just going to guess on Tua versus Penix, or I guess I'm going to take Carson Beck and hope that he's the guy you need in December. Like you get into those situations. And so it becomes really scary really quick. So how do you balance like the market dynamics of quarterback? Because they feel well overpriced, but obviously if you miss out on them, your team is probably not doing great anyway. Like how are you kind of balancing that? Because I find it really tough this year, personally, when I'm in drafts.
This is what I remind myself. Quarterbacks are not the engine of best ball. I'm not saying they're not important, because obviously they are, but there's way too much quarterback to wide receiver correlation besides just team correlation. My biggest lineup ever was T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and I did not have Joe Burrow. The people that had Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase did not get there. The people that had Joe Burrow and T. Higgins didn't get there. And so for me, it's okay if I don't get my quarterback. However, I also feel very good drafting after pick 150. I think people need to just don't draft. Go look at the ADPs, 150 and afterwards, and just study them and say, okay, if everything goes terrible, I can take this running back, this wide receiver, this tight end, because the quarterbacks aren't going to be there. There will be a running back that can offer you something. There will be lots of wide receivers that can offer you something. And there will be tons of tight ends that will offer you something. So for me, I don't mind going ahead of ADP just to make sure I have at least 2 quarterbacks that don't make me want to jump off a bridge. And as long as I get those 2 quarterbacks, I'm okay with it. And again, backstacking is fine. Like everybody forgets last year when the DK data dump came out, do you know who the most highly correlated players were between quarterback and wide receiver?
Who was it?
It was J.J. McCarthy and Justin Jefferson at 52%. And how'd that stack, dude?
That's amazing in hindsight.
And so you have to find these, and obviously that was more of a 9 situation, I think, than just Justin Jefferson. But the point is, too, is that, so for example, this year, let's look at the ADP. So this year, the quarterback 24 goes off before pick 146. That's almost a full round up from last year. So by pick 146, the top 24 QBs are gone. I've got to try to get to before that pick 146. 146 in the quarterback tier is something that I am targeting and making sure that if I don't have 2 quarterbacks, it's about to get real gross.
Real gross. Yeah, you're looking at, like I said, Carson Beck, or you're hoping Geno stays under center for 12 plus games this year, stuff like that, which that's not, if that happens to me in drafts, like quite literally when I leave the draft, I'm like, well, that team's dead. So there's times where it happens and you kind of just, you kick yourself in hindsight. Along the same lines, though, like kind of thinking through that ADP dynamic, I mentioned at the start of this kind of segment of like top-down view, quarterbacks going earlier, running backs are pushed up. And so I find myself gravitating to wide receivers to be different. There have been times, though, in those scenarios, in those builds, where I get to a point where I have 5 wide receivers. Let's say we're in round 8 or something like that. And I'm like, man, I love this team. And all of a sudden I keep looking, I'm like, oh, the best picks are still the wide receivers. And you can't just keep going with that, because eventually you have way too much draft capital and quantity submitted to one position, and then all of a sudden you are behind the 8 ball at either running back or quarterback. And I will say, if people have been drafting over the last 3 months when things opened, those rooms are probably filled with some better drafters, people that are caring about this stuff like we are, true sickos, in May and early June. But as we get into August, people are logging in for the first time in a while. Oh, cool, DraftKings is a promo. I'd like to enter this contest. You'll see some wild stuff in those rooms. And so my only thing about like being so gung-ho on zero RB or hero RB this year, which I do want to be overweight those builds, is just that if you remain balanced in the earlier part of your drafts on DraftKings, I think you have a better chance to scoop up that ADP value that falls to you, which will fall to you. It's like it will at this point this summer when we get into these more casual rooms. How do you balance like that with the whole quarterback wide receiver dynamic that I was just mentioning? Because I found that a couple of times recently where I have this team I love, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I want to take Jordan Addison here, but I kind of need Rico Dowdle or whoever it is, those sort of things. What are your thoughts on that?
So I've kind of caught myself in the early part of the draft season realizing that I'm doing that, because all of a sudden I have like 22% blank quorum, which wasn't intentional. It's just that when you go heavy wide receiver, you end up kind of falling into these running backs in that range. So I do think you're exactly right. Like, I think that robust RB is something that people, like, it's not sexy, it's not zero RB, but it's not hyper fragile either. So it's like this weird middle ground. It's like, oh, you mean only the best build so that I can literally just beat the other people in the draft room? Because like you said, you can get that falling value. And there's nothing worse on the planet than when you're sitting there with 4 wide receivers and then a guy falls from like Egbuka falls as your fit and you're like, oh my gosh. And then you don't have a chance to do it because I had a start like that, and I was like, I'm going to try this. It was awful. Do not do it. Do not recommend 1 out of 5 stars. So make sure that you, and I think that one thing about the flexibility, definitely do that, but also everybody's got to chill with the closing line value. From a portfolio standpoint, it is very important to make better decisions over the long run. But in one draft, if I need to pull a guy up 9 spots, okay. It's okay. It's okay to take a running back in the 5th round. If I'm sitting there and all of a sudden I need to pull up Ramondre 6 spots, I don't like it. I'm sad. I'm going to go stand in the corner for a minute. But at the end of the day, for my build, that's going to be more important because, like you said, using the draft capital at one position is going to just leave you toasted at other spots.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that point up. And I wanted to ask this question to you as well, because I put this out on Twitter from a draft I was in just a couple of nights ago. Somebody pulled up Chris Olave to the 13th pick to pair with Genti. And I took a screenshot, shared it on X, and just said, like, I understand the value of this person's idea, which is probably like, hey, let's get a unique combo. Nobody has this right now. But at the same time, I'd be shocked if like Chris Olave is like the top 15 overall scorer this year. Could it happen? Yeah, possibly. But the other thing, like along those same lines, is somebody asked me like, well, don't you think you should do unique combos too? And I said, like, yes, I think there is value in that. But because you're drafting so many teams across the entire summer, when people start doing some of this weird stuff, then you inherently in the same room get a unique combo because people are doing weird stuff and you're getting a lot of ADP value there. So how do you balance that in the earlier rounds? Because I think it is valuable, but at some point, like, how valuable actually is it when you're sacrificing projection and rankings?
This is an excellent question, and something that I don't think gets discussed enough. Because for me, too, one thing I'm trying to do this year is a little bit more in the first 5 rounds is just, okay, how can I get, this side of the board? Because it's funny, we'll get into a question in a minute about archetypes, but it's crazy how the primacy affects best ball. If you guys aren't familiar with the primacy effect, it's the human psychology just to pick the thing that's at the top of the list. And we play in a game where that is so prevalent that it sort of dictates this ADP unless there's major news breaking or your name is Bill. And so for us, it's all about when I see that, like this happened to me today, I noticed that I'm way under on James Cook. And if everybody forgets, James Cook he had the most 100-yard rushing games of any player last season with 9.
Led the league in rushing a year ago.
Yeah, and I was like, all right, I'm going to pull him up. So I pulled him up to 5. You should have seen the other teams in that pod. And I'm like, what did I do? I just gave everybody these falling values. And so it's just, I think it just comes down to a shotgun approach, Betz. And you just got to be able to do a lot of stuff so that you can be the guy that gets those unique combos and you're the guy that can create those unique combos in order to balance out your portfolio.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Speaking on, you mentioned James Cook with the rushing yard bonus. Obviously, on DraftKings, we get these bonuses for 300-yard passing games, 100-yard receiving, 100-yard rushing. I know you have some research on this. How much do you factor in the bonuses? And then as well, we had a question in Discord about kind of like archetypes with full PPR scoring versus half. Like somebody asked about, Rachaad White as an example this year. Like his pass catching chops will go a longer way on DraftKings than it will for, Underdog, for example, where he's only getting a half point per reception. I think of other guys like Devon Achane, who in previous seasons was a PPR cheat code because of his pass catching ability with Mike McDaniel and Tua. Like, do you boost those archetypes? Are you heavily considering the bonuses? How do you treat that type of stuff?
Receptions are more important to me than bonuses. Bonuses are more of a tiebreaker for me, but it's too hard to predict. I mean, if you look at, and with the bonuses, guys, it's already priced in. That's what people don't realize is that, okay, well, I can sit down and this guy's likely to get a 100-yard bonus. Because of the 14 players hit a DK bonus at least 5 times, 11 of them are in the first 2 rounds. The other 3 are Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, and then Stephon Diggs. So that was from last year, though, so that's not this year. But for me, it's more about receptions because that's much easier to project. And so, last year, there was only 95 people hit a rushing bonus. There was only 95 100-yard games. And then there was 152 100-yard receiving games. And so for me, it's just that's not a large enough sample that I need to completely change my draft strategy. It just comes down to a tiebreaker. What about you? Do you consider that?
I don't really consider the bonuses much because, like you said, I think inherently we all think about this stuff in the same way. Like when I think about the most prolific passers in the game, Joe Burrow, Dak, you mentioned Jared Goff will spike a bunch throughout the year. Like I'm already thinking in my head, like those are the guys that could do this. And I think on DraftKings, because we get some of those bonuses, you will have some years where the elite rushing profiles don't separate as much as they do on a half PPR site where you're not getting the bonuses. So I will say that is one thing I do consider. Like I want to have some Josh Allen this year. Don't get me wrong, because he plays the Dolphins in week 17. This guy could go bonkers. Like you don't have to spin it much to understand where he could bury you. But at the same time, the ability for some of these pocket passers to pop up for multiple 300-yard games this year. I mentioned Jared Goff on a show recently that Kyle and I did about like best ball league winners. I love Jared Goff's upside this year with the schedule, with the ability to deliver those bonuses and those huge high-end outcomes. I think Dak is a perfect example that you mentioned about that. So I think it is to some degree already baked in, but I do consider the archetype thing for sure. Like I am much more willing to draft, let's say like Dave Montgomery's kind of a hot topic right now. There was I don't even want to say it was a report. I will say there was a suggestion from somebody in the media about like this could be a timeshare with Woody Marks. And then there was also multiple reports the week prior that was like, this is Dave Montgomery's backfield through and through. And so that's the best part of this year is we get all the information and it's our job to kind of sort through it. But basically what I was going to say is like the way that Dave Montgomery hits for us this year in best ball is a probably pretty mostly bland, inefficient, generally speaking, performance across the board, but he stays alive for all 17 games and he falls in the end zone 12 times. That will get rewarded way more on Underdog on a half PPR site where we're not getting those full PPR receptions. So like on DraftKings, sometimes when Dave Montgomery will go in the fourth round, that's something that I'm just personally not doing because of the upside wide receivers that go around him. But there are times on Underdog where it's like, okay, I do feel like I'm a little bit behind here at running back. Like if he does fall in the end zone 12 times, like this is probably a pretty good pick. So I will say that I do consider archetypes across different sites. I mentioned the Devon Achane example from a couple years ago. Somebody like a Bill Krosky-Merritt maybe is more appealing on Underdog versus Rachaad White on DraftKings, like that type of stuff. But no, I'm not considering the bonuses quite as much for the reasons you mentioned. Share the week 17 100+ yard receivers from last year because it is so funny to kind of think about like when we're drafting our teams and we have this kind of week 17 correlation in mind. It's fun to make those combos and it does have its place in our drafts, don't get me wrong. But the idea that we could predict the correct combinations specifically of like this receiver with this tight end or this running back with this receiver on opposing teams is literally impossible to do. And when you share the names with me, I was like, hold on, wait a minute, read these names because it is fascinating to hear this. It's really hard to predict when the spike weeks are going to happen. And so my reason for bringing that up is because I think you want to invite variance into late season outcomes versus saying like, this is the combination that I'm going for. If you're stacking up, I don't know, Carolina, Seattle just came to mind. Like, I don't want all of my teams that have that week 17 correlation to be the same two pairings because as we know, chaos happens, injuries happen, weird things happen. So share the list and then kind of take me through your process on some week 17 type stuff.
Okay, I love that. And I think that my favorite stat, because I remember last year when I was drafting, it was all about the Rams at Falcons on Monday Night Football. It was coming down to that game. And
Yes.
after 2024, I was not going to be the kid that didn't have a player in that game. Now, if you look, one of my favorite stats that everybody needs to remember is that in Week 17 last year, 8 games went over 50 points. One of them was inside. So the whole draft season, everybody's saying, oh, man, we better get the indoor games. You don't know. I mean, the Bears and 49ers is what won somebody a million. So this is the Week 17 100-plus receiving kings. Luther Burden and Wan'Dale Robinson, both in the Million Maker lineup. Because, I mean, Wan'Dale Robinson, known guy for his yardage, right?
Obviously.
I mean, obviously. Chris Olave, Jalen McMillan, Chris Godwin, Steph Diggs, and my boy, Brandon Cooks. Those are the guys that scored 100, and 2 of them were on the Million Maker winner. Now, I mean, it's obviously pretty easy to get Burden and Wan'Dale last year because of where they were being drafted. But then let's look at all right, so let's go to the rushing. So here's the 100-plus rushing yard kings from Week 17. Bijan. That was the big one. You had to have him for Monday Night Football.
Legendary performance.
Yes. And now this one's a little more easier to predict, so maybe we need to touch on this. Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Zach Charbonnet, Bill, he did it. He did it for the people that drafted him, Malik Davis, and Chase Brown. So the receiving guy or the rushing guys are a little bit more, okay, that makes sense. But the receivers guys, there's just no way we can tell. I mean, is it going to be like, who's the Dolphins receiver against the Bills? You're going to have Josh Allen, Betz. All right, you're in the finals. You got Kincaid. And who's the bring back? Who's the run back that game? We don't know.
Oh, man. That hurts to even think through what that could even look like, if I'm being honest. But the biggest point on this too is and this kind of goes back to the Ricky Pearsall year. When you're getting to Week 17, best ball is so funny in that we're not trying to predict what's going to happen in 3 or 4 months. You're trying to basically draft these teams that have good structure based off of good projections, good rankings that are volatile, but good rankings that can put you in a position to succeed if this kind of stuff that you all just put in a blender comes out the right way. Jalen McMillan missed half the year, right? I imagine his advance rate, especially for teams that were drafting early in May and June before we got the training camp injury, was pretty poor. But if you had a low roster Jalen McMillan sneak through and he goes off for a huge game late in the year, which again, you cannot predict, but and Ricky Pearsall was a horrible pick for 16 weeks, basically, the year that he had, his rookie year. But in Week 17, you kind of had to have him to be at the top of the leaderboard. So it's so wild to me kind of thinking through that stuff. And I used to play this game through the lens of redraft, where it's he's not going to be ready for, Week 1. You got to really dock him in the ranks. And it's well, now, okay, sure, you should move him down, but what if he's the guy that spikes in December, when you need him the most? So I'm glad you pointed out that. Brandon Cooks, I mean, what a legend. The fact that the Bills are putting out Brandon Cooks and Tyrell Shavers in a playoff game in the year 2026 was amazing. But good data there for sure on those 100-yard bonuses. The next thing on our doc to get through is going to be some of the biggest differences in rankings from Underdog to DraftKings. Before we get into that, let's take one more break and we'll be right back.
Now at McDonald's, get a $5 McChicken meal deal or a $6 McDouble meal deal. They come with small fries, a soft drink, and 4-piece McNuggets. We're gonna need a bigger tray. Get more value with your meal deal.
Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher for delivery.
When you're a maintenance engineer in a beverage manufacturing plant, you keep production lines moving and quality on track because there's no room for slowdowns. With Grainger's vast selection of high-quality motors, sensors, belts, and hard-to-find parts, you can get what you need fast and all in one place, so nothing gets in the way of getting the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
All right, Underdog, half PPR, DraftKings, full PPR. So talk me through how you think about rankings and how it kind of boosts in certain aspects on DK versus Underdog.
So going back to the receptions thing, that's going to be a big part of it. One thing I've done this year that I've been kind of messing around with the UDK is I actually have I have completely surpassed Kyle as a freak in the spreadsheets and have some very detailed data on rankings. I'm actually trying to incorporate a little bit more season long with some best ball rankings, just because I feel like over the past 3 or 4 years, we've gone so ceiling based outcome that we forget that we do kind of need some floor some places.
Yeah.
And so for me this year, it's really more about like, there's not these huge differences. And this is a big thing I want to say. Just because I don't like a player on DraftKings doesn't mean I don't like them on Underdog. Here's an example. So for me, I am going to be a little bit underweight on Saquon and DK. And the reason is I'm going to be overweight on Underdog. And here's why. In the UDK, for example, Barkley's only projected for 36 catches. So for context, Gibbs and CMC are projected for 76. Now the guys after him, Chase Brown, 58. Achane, 60. Ginty, 53. Hampton, 44. I mean, it doesn't get down to Kinbone until there's somebody with the same receiving profile as him. So for me, I'm going to be overweight. I'll probably about 14-50% on UD for Saquon, and then I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to take the pass catchers on DraftKings and go from there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I do think that archetype kind of conversation is pretty nuanced, but I think is important for sure. And like when you're thinking about the Saquon, for example, when he had that amazing season a couple years ago, he wins Offensive Player of the Year. Like his best games are ripping off, 40-yard touchdowns and not really catching a ton of passes. Like he did have some touchdown receptions and everything, of course, but thinking about the Jalen Hurts-led offense, generally speaking, he's not going to throw the running back as much as other teams. Devon Achane, for example, you mentioned. So I'm glad you brought that up. We also had some multiple questions here about like roster construction. I mentioned at the top of the show at a segment that we did earlier, the 3-6-8-3 build is kind of typical. Somebody else in Discord is asking about like, is 2 quarterback viable? Is 2 tight end viable on DraftKings? Because I'll share kind of my take on this. The answer is yes, it is definitely viable. The short of it is viable. There are moments, however, where, and I've been thinking through like the new meta in the NFL, right? Where everybody is kind of moving towards multiple tight end sets. Like it's in vogue, it's the new hot thing. 2 wide receiver sets are the new thing. Whereas like 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of offenses were moving towards 3 wide receiver sets, and it was very different. It was more pass heavy league. Now pass attempts are down across the board. That will change eventually, but I think most people agree that's where most teams will try to go to. It's a copycat league this year. And so when I'm thinking about that, it's like, man, you get to the last round on DraftKings, you get to round 19. There are times where I'm looking at, I don't know, like it's a Lamar team, and like, sure, I could throw a dart on Jacoby Lane or Elijah Surratt, but like if I already have Zay and Mark Andrews or something, like, Mike Gesicki's sitting right there. Maybe I already have 2 tight ends that I feel really good about, but I don't have a bring back for week 17. Like, do I need a 3rd tight end on that team? Probably not, but is he maybe the best pick for this team? Probably, maybe. And so I've done that on teams where it's like, the old rules are like kind of what we all go by is like, if you're drafting tight ends early, you probably only need 2. If you're punting them off, you need 3, maybe you need 4. But I have opened my mind to this idea of like, even though the quote unquote optimal strategy here is to only take 2, let's say you took like Tyler Warren and because the Q tag on DK, Tucker Kraft falls. And so those are your 2 tight ends. But you get to round 20 and you're like, I don't feel great about any of these wide receivers. Maybe Mike Gesicki's a pick. Maybe Michael Mayer is a pick, for the Raiders, stuff like that. So how do you kind of treat this like 2 quarterback and 2 tight end, specifically the tight end situation on DK?
Okay, so Betz, I want you to imagine this. Me and you are about to get into a street fight, okay? We're going to walk outside into the alley, and we get to draft our weapons, okay?
And we are so scary, by the way.
Yeah, if you don't know me and Betz, we are mean dudes. And so we're going to the alley, we get to draft our weapons, all right? So I pick a bazooka, all right? And we're going to call Josh Allen the bazooka. So I'm going to go to this fight with the bazooka, all right?
Seems right, yep.
Then I'm going to wait, and I get another pick, and I'm like, all right, I'll get a shotgun, I'll get like a Daniel Jones. Well, why would I get a 3rd weapon? Like, why would I pick a Tua and bring a handgun when I have a bazooka that I'm going to win the street fight with? And that's how I try to think about it when it comes to positions. I have no qualms about 2 quarterbacks this year. If I'm taking a Josh Allen or a Lamar or even a Jaden, depending on the build, and I get like a Jared Goff or somebody good on the 2nd. But tight ends are different because, like you said, there are a lot of viable tight ends on run backs that aren't attainable. One of my favorites and frustrating teams or games this year is the Bears and Lions in week 17. Trying to stack either one of those teams is so hard to do.
Yeah, they're all right there in ADP together.
Correct. So, but Cole Kmet is my 3rd tight end when I've got a Brock Bowers and a Greg Dulcich. Sure. that's a bring back. And I mean, Commit and Mayer, there's a lot of these later tight ends that people will not draft that I think will hit your flex if you just have an awful week.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. There was a time, too, in a recent draft where it was a Josh Allen team. I got sniped on DJ Moore, Kincaid, and Shakir. And I was like, okay. Like, I went late round tight end in this build. Dawson Knox each week is not going to project great. But if we look up at the end of the year and he has, I don't know, 5 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns, maybe they hit it the right week, that is viable on a site like DraftKings where on Underdog, you don't have those extra rounds to kind of play with that type of stuff. So I would say 2 tight end is definitely viable, but I will say I'm less into it this year because I think in those later rounds, some of the best picks are the tight ends, and it sounds gross to say, but that's kind of how I'm treating it, especially right now before we really get deep into training camp and we have injuries that happen or we have surprise RB2s that we thought was the other guy and we learn new information. Right now, I think those are some of the best picks. So yeah, I think that is something to consider. I want to move on a little bit here, kind of looking at DraftKings contest selection. Obviously, in DFS, contest selection is something we talk about all the time. Are you a cash game player? Do you allocate most of your funds to cash games? Are you doing more head-to-heads versus 50-50s? Are you in large field lotto style contests in DFS, or are you kind of in the small field? Like that to me is a huge factor before you even go into the apps, before you even log into week 1. You have to know your goals. And I think in best ball, we mention it like here and there, but nobody really talks about it, right? It's like, okay, you download your rankings, you put them in, and you just fire away without really considering like what do you want to be doing with your bankroll this year, which is so important because it's very easy to get behind and over invest in this stuff if you don't have good sound strategy on what you want to do from a goals perspective. So on DK, obviously they have the flagship, the Millie. There's a bunch of other type of contests as well. Have you looked at these contest selection factors? Are there any specific ones that you'd recommend? What do you play in? Share some data here with the folks.
Sure. So I have an article on one of the DK series, and I basically just broke up all the DraftKings contests. I actually talked to somebody from DraftKings last week, and I was like, hey, here's some things that the best ball people are wanting. This is what we want to do. Are you guys going to be dropping any tournaments? And they're like, no. What we're going to probably do is not probably. What they're going to do is they're going to just, like if the $3 fills, which it's about to, they're just going to open up a new one. And so a lot of their contests are going to be pretty stagnant, or not stagnant, but they're going to be the same. And so looking into it, I mean, you guys have to remember that the Millie Maker has a 15% rake. That's a lot higher than DFS, because DFS is normally in that 10% range. So I mean, 15% of the pool is out completely. And so for me, I will continue to do the Millie just because I feel like I kind of owe it at this point. And well,
legally obligated.
When you get a taste of the sweetness, my friend, trust me, it is very, very hard to turn away.
I believe it.
Some of the things that I always tell people though too, it's like I kind of hate the best ball space from a tout perspective because everybody just looks at the $1 million wins when there's a lot of dudes that are just out here grinding out 10-20% returns every year, and those are the guys that I really have a lot of respect for. So for me with the tournaments, I really like the play action because the max buy-in is $60 and it's a lotto style. It's a 16% rake, but you can get 20 lineups. You've got a $5 huddle, and I really think that if you're starting off, you can take $100 to $200 and really diversify your portfolio where you have a chance to shotgun and hit one of those big tournaments. I mean, you can look at the more expensive ones, and there's ones like $3,100, but it's only a 5% rake. But you're like, yeah, I mean, I'm not dropping $3K on it. So for me, I'm going to do the Millie, and then pretty much every other tournament, I'll do a couple of the 555s, but I won't do any of the 3,000s. That's just too. I only get 4 shots at it, and that's just too much of my bankroll going into it for that. What about you?
For sure. Yeah, for me, like when I first started playing on DraftKings, I was kind of firing at a bunch of the mid to low stakes contests and just kind of having fun with it. And then after a couple years looking at like advance rate and stuff, I've actually had most success in that standpoint, which, when you tell your wife about your advance rate, she doesn't care. Like she wants to know, did you win or not? So for my process, when I look at the advance rates and stuff, I have had a lot more success in these kind of larger lotto style contests. Again, speaking only from advance rate, I am down across a couple seasons in bankroll as far as actual dollars. So again, the wives, the misses, like, hey, that's not good enough. But if you know that you're getting, we'll talk about get your money in good. Like, I feel like when we're in these rooms and people are doing the wildest, weirdest stuff, I'm going to lose 7, 8, 9 slates in a row. That's kind of just the nature of it, right? But like you had a season where you got a couple teams through, you got one that really showed up in a big way. Like I feel like if you're doing this stuff and you're treating each season as a slate, which that's important to remember, like we're still so early in this. This is one slate each year, basically, right? You think about it from a DFS standpoint. In DFS, we get 18 slates from week 1 to week 18 in the regular season, then you get the playoffs. So you just reset every week. This is one giant slate, and then you wait months for the next one to start. And so I do play in the millie. I play in the $3 play action just because, I mean, I think the action's soft. And yeah, not every team's going to win, obviously, but hopefully if you play enough there and you have some good teams and you get them through, eventually one of them will pop for you. So maybe this is my year, Chris. We'll see. We'll see on that. But I'm glad you brought up some of those different options for people. They do have everything from $1 to, like you said, $3,000. So whatever your bankroll is, they do have it for you on DK as well. Let's close out here with some player takes. That's always fun, right? It's always fun to talk through structure and contests. Chris, the people want to know, who should we draft? That's what they want to know. So we had a question on Twitter, which
we need the clicks, baby.
I like this. It's all about the clicks. They asked what your favorite spot to draft from to get a different type of structure. So, for example, if you like Hero RB this year, like where do you like to draft from? If you're more of a zero RB guy, like where do you like to draft from? That type of stuff.
So I liked this question, and I started going through and looking at my draft board exposure. And by the way, if you guys aren't using fantasy.vip or Best Ball Explorer, they're all free tools that will keep track of all your drafts. I highly recommend you all do that. It's free. It is free. And so I can pull up all my drafts and I can see my exposure. So I started kind of looking at the board. And for me, the way that the wide receiver heavy or zero RB falls, it's going to be in that pick 3, 4, or 5. So I'm going to be taking Puka and Chase. I'll kind of, depending on the draft, I'll go back and forth. But, I can go like a Puka, Bowers, Olave, Burden type start. And that's my money area right there. I mean, I'm very happy with 3 strong wide receivers in Brock Bowers. Is there a favorite spot you have for zero RB?
I mean, I'm kind of with you. I think being in the middle of the draft where you get one of those elite wide receivers early and then you're able to come back in like round 2, round 3, and you're able to get somebody like a London who will fall sometimes, or AJ Brown sometimes will fall in the second round. And then in the third round, there's a bunch of high upside options, whether it's Zay or Ibuka, or pick your favorite T. Higgins, I think is really fun. Like there's ways that you can get those builds that look really good in the middle. I will say if I have the 101 or the 102, for me, that is Gibbs versus Bijan. And I feel so rock solid about those builds being hero RB builds. I think you can do it with, if you like Saquon or if you like Gentry or whoever your top running back is there at the kind of the 1-2 turn. I think you can do it from that side of the board as well. But obviously, I just feel way better about that when you have the 101 or the 102 and you're getting one of those aliens there at the top. Another question I really liked here was from Connor in Discord, talking about like big values relative to rankings with the iconic DraftKings Q tag, which is a beautiful thing this time of year. If you're new to DraftKings and you log in, do not be overwhelmed when you see players that have a Q next to their name, or right now, Zach Charbonnet just got placed on the training camp PUP. He has an out next to his name. And so if you've been outside seeing sunlight all summer and this is the first time coming back in, you log in, you're like, I cannot draft Zach Charbonnet. He's out this year. Like, I can't do this. So players like that will fall a lot. There are a bunch of players that have, some of them are warranted, but some of them are like rogue Q tags from like, hey, Dak Prescott he had a day off in minicamp because he had a sore foot. I'm not worried about that at all. Like he's not in the ultimate draft kit injury report. Like we're not docking Dak at all, but he has a Q tag as of this recording on DraftKings. So how do you balance those guys with like scooping up value when it falls? Because there are times where Tedero McMillan, who had a Q tag because of a foot issue in OTAs, will fall into the 5th round. Like, I don't want to just keep doing that over and over because I'm like, oh, what a great value. And all of a sudden you look up and you've got 25% of a player. How do you balance that Q tag fall, which does happen on DraftKings, with trying to make sure your exposures don't get too crazy?
This is a market-based game. Where are we in the market? One thing that people forget about ADP is that the decline is always slow. Okay, look at Brandon Ayuk, who has lost his mind. Tyreek Hill doesn't have power in his left foot, apparently. And they're slowly going down. And then Jaden Blue comes out 2 weeks ago, and he's already up 35 spots. I want to try to figure out...
Wow.
Yes. Or, sorry, 30. He's up 30 points over the last month. And so, for me, where am I in the market? So, let's look at, like, Who's a good one? Neighbors, for example. I think Neighbors is going to continue to fall. So I'm going to hold unless he just falls to the 5th, which I have gotten a share in the 5th, which was noise. So what I'm trying to do here is find a way to know where I am in the market. Like right now, the Harold Fannin fall is really interesting to me because Fannin is sort of on this cusp of, is he elite or is he not elite? And all of a sudden he's dropped 24 spots. Is this the end of the fall? Because if that's the case, I want to load up if he goes back up another round through the fall. So it's really more about predicting the player's timeline and how they're going to move in the market. And I'm going to try to buy it at the very lowest point, like a good stockbroker or a stock guy, which I am not. So
yeah, this is your way. This is the game to play to pretend you understand finances and stocks and all that sort of stuff. Basically the same thing, no big deal.
Just so easy.
I'm glad you also brought that up too on the other end of the spectrum. Like sometimes we view this Q tag phenomenon on DK as a way to be like, I got these amazing values on the players I already like. For example, Dak, when he falls, like I'm not really that worried about Tedro McMillan at all. So like when he falls, I think it's a good value. Fannin, I'm glad you brought up. But there are other players where like I know I'm lower than market on these guys, and sometimes they fall, and I say to myself, okay, I could be wrong about this guy. This is a good opportunity for me to get a share or two when I want to hedge my bets a little bit, and I don't want to have 15% of this guy, but maybe I want like 6, maybe I want 5%, something like that. And a perfect example of that for right now is Malik Neighbors, who we're still kind of waiting on what's going on with the knee injury and where is he at in the recovery and all that sort of stuff. Like you, I got a share in the 5th round, and that was my first share this summer. Like I just hadn't been drafting him because I thought we were going to get a better price. And in the 5th round, it was like, okay, this feels like a good time to get a share. Same thing happened a couple of drafts ago I did with Alec Pierce. I'm lower than market on Pierce and Daniel Jones because of just how hot they ran last year. I think the Colts are probably due for some natural regression. Both guys are coming off a surgery. So just I'm betting against that in my portfolio. That does not mean at some point Alec Pierce is not a good pick. He fell to like pick 100, and it was like I need a wide receiver. I'm gonna take a share here, So I think you can use it in both directions, where like you have your advantage of the Q tag guys you like, and they fall, and you keep scooping them. At the same time, use it as an excuse every now and then to mix these guys in, especially if you're drafting, hundreds of teams or something. So I think that's a good way to think about it as well. We had another question come in about fades. So Colin in Discord said, who are some of your favorite picks in the 3-4 term? But at the same time, who are your stronger fades in the earlier rounds, let's say rounds 1 through 5?
This is just right now. This will change.
Yeah, it always does.
My first one is Jeremiah Love, and I hate it because, everybody forgets that one of CMC's best season was when he was playing for some absolutely god-awful teams. And so I think that the Jeremiah Love, for me personally, I'm being a little too biased towards the Arizona Cardinals 3.5 implied win total, which is not fair because his playoff schedule is also very tasty. I have absolutely no problem finishing the season with some sort of Las Vegas Raiders versus Arizona Cardinals stack. I mean, what could go wrong, Betz? 60 points. Ironclad lock of this podcast. 60 points in week 17 with the Cardinals and Raiders. So I'm definitely under on Love. Breece Hall, same situation. I'll probably come up with him with this contract. Javonte Williams, I think his price is too high. Last year we got him at like, 110-ish, somewhere arogoing there. Mm-hmm. I'm fine with that, but 37, 36, I'm okay. And then with Judkins, I know you and I have discussed it briefly, but he's going to have to run so hot with touchdowns, and I don't know what the Browns are. And so those will come up eventually, but I'm just hoping they fall a little bit further before I can start scooping them up.
Yeah, I'm with you on some of those takes as well. Jeremiah Love is so interesting because, like you said, and this is true for all the Cardinals, like it could be kind of rough at times throughout the year, but if you're able to get some of these kind of lower rostered Cardinals, and I don't mean low rostered in that they're not being drafted, like everybody's drafting Trey McBride in every draft, Jeremiah Love in every draft, Marvin Harrison, etc., in every draft. So they're not low rostered, but like if you have these kind of down seasons that all of a sudden they get to the playoffs and they spike, that can be so powerful in this game. And so, yeah, like just picturing Raiders and Cardinals in week 17 shooting out, Carson Beck versus Fernando Mendoza sounds pretty fun. So I definitely want some exposures in that game stack too. As far as the guy, go ahead.
Can I interest you in a 7% Kendrick Bourne? 7% owned Kendrick Bourne for week 17?
I'm not lying. I have clicked him once or twice, and every time, and I say every time, the 2 times I've done it, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, did I really want to do that? I guess not. But what's so fun about this game too is you can draft your team, and like within like 10 minutes, you don't even remember what the team was. You're just like, whatever, it's done. I can't do anything about it now. It's over. Nobody can judge me for Kendrick Bourne. Moving on. But as far as the fades I have, I share some of the similar ones with you. I will not be full fading these guys, but I will be underweight. I mentioned the David Montgomery kind of archetype on DraftKings. Not huge into that. I'm a little more worried about Devon Achane than I think market is on just the Malik Willis floor, the team level concerns, like how many touchdowns are these guys scoring? How prolific can this offense really be? So I'll be underweight Achane, which is terrifying. And then same thing for me on Jonathan Taylor. I mentioned kind of the Colts. Like I was a buyer last year. I'm a little bit of a seller this year. So there's just other guys I prefer in those earlier rounds. I mentioned Neighbors. I'm just trying to wait to get the best prices possible. I obviously don't want zero of him if he can get back to health and spike late in the season. Those are a couple ones that came to mind. As far as like the 3-4 turn, I think it's a really strong area of the draft this year. I talked about this in Discord with somebody yesterday. Everybody right now has their guy, right? They love Zay Flowers. They love Ladd McConkey, Ibuka, whoever like your guy is kind of that goes in that range. The one guy that nobody is talking about right now that I'm super into is T. Higgins. Doesn't it kind of feel like he's like the boring pick right there? But I'm well overweight T. Higgins this year, and I'll tell you what, I cannot wait to get burned again.
I am at 15.8% on DK. So I am with you. Everybody ready to go last year. He was at the 2-3 turn, and now we're getting it around cheaper. Give me the T. I mean, I think there's something about this Bengals offense this year. I think the defense may be just a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And I think that, we get a cheaper T than we had last year. So I am 2 Indians, 1 canoe, you and me.
Let's go. Yeah, Brandon Thorne, who does a lot of awesome offensive line analysis and work, actually had the Bengals kind of ranked as like a mid-tier team, which when you think about the Bengals teams of the last like 3 or 4 years, they've always been like bottom 5 in consensus rankings. Like if they can actually be the 14th best offensive line this year and you're getting Burrow, fingers crossed, healthy, and the targets to just condense these two guys, that we could see some fireworks. So I love T a lot there, but there's a lot of strong picks in that range of the draft for sure. All right, Chris, we've said a lot about DraftKings. Is there anything else that we missed, that I skipped over? Any last DraftKings takes you want to get off your chest?
No, not really from a player perspective. I think just one thing I recommend for everybody, this is what I've been doing this offseason, read game theory. Everybody, we talk ball so much, and especially this time of year when there's so many false reports and we overthink a player. Let's start thinking about ways we can be smarter than our pod from a game perspective and not just from a football IQ perspective. So you guys keep grinding out the best ball drafts. I promise you will hit it one day as long as you're smart and responsible with your bankroll. So let's get it, Foot Clan. I want to see those big wins this year.
Yeah, it should be fun. I'm very excited for this season, and it always kind of flies by the summer. You get to a point where you're like, oh, we only have like, a month and a half left of drafting. It's kind of sad. But these August drafts are always very, very fun. We finally get news flying in. Kyle and I do adjust our rankings, but we're not adjusting them as much right now because it's been the dead period of the last 2 weeks. When news is flying fast and furious here in the next couple of weeks, they will be updated sometimes daily, in there. So make sure you're tuned in there in the DFS Pass. And Chris is a resource for us. He's always in Discord, super valuable for the Foot Clan, especially in season, asking questions about, contest selection or the optimizer or GPP plays or whatever it is. Chris is the guy. Excited to have him back this year. And Chris will be on again the podcast in, I think, about a month. I'll be away at the beach, so he'll fill in for me and podcast with Borg, talking about some DFS concepts later this summer. So it'll be another Chris episode in a few weeks. Chris, let the people know if they aren't aware, where can they find you on Twitter?
I am Chris Cash Music, ChrisCash Music, and I will be trying to do my best Borg and Betz impersonation with some cool stats here and there.
Love it, man. Thank you so much for joining me today. This was great. Hopefully everybody enjoyed. Follow Chris on Twitter. Check out his work in the DFS Pass. It's amazing. So thankful to have him on again this year. And for Chris, for myself, for Kyle, who is currently dancing the night away with frosted tips. Not a joke. I do have a picture of this at the Backstreet Boys concert. He'll be back next week. We will tune in for more best ball. We'll see you then. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at thefantasyfootballers.com.
Now, at McDonald's, wake up to a $4 breakfast meal deal. Wake up to a sausage McMuffin or a sausage biscuit, to hash browns, and wake up to a hot coffee. Get your $4 breakfast meal deal.
Limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher for delivery.
In the U.S., there's a break-in every 26 seconds. But when intruders step near, Simply Safe Home Security steps up.
Stop. This is Simply Safe. Police are on the way.
Using AI alerts, US-based live agents help deter break-ins. SimpliSafe, no long-term contracts. Save 50% on your new system with professional monitoring at simplisafe.com/SXM or with promo code SXM.
Outdoor deterrence requires a SimpliSafe Active Guard outdoor protection plan starting at $49.99 a month. Visit simplisafe.com/licenses for alarm license information. Tennessee 2012.